BottleNed presents the oldest and rarest Western saloon bottles.
BottleNed here. I've had some requests and I have a really special episode for you guys. And this episode doesn't focus as much on digging, but it focuses on the history and bottles associated with the earliest saloons in the West. And the earliest saloons in the West were in San Francisco. So we're going to take a dive into the stinkiest, deepest, darkest, muddiest layers of history and show you some bottles that are so goddamn rare, you probably never even heard of them, let alone seen them. I'm also going to tell you some amazing history associated with the establishments that produced these bottles in the 1850s and early 1860s. So these are the oldest saloon bottles in the American West. Let's check them out. Bam!
Gold Rush era San Francisco was a rough town full of miners, prostitutes, criminals, and con artists who had come from all over the world to try to get their hands on as much gold as they could. In the 1850s, San Francisco wasn't much of a cultured city. There were no schools, parks, museums, libraries, reading rooms, or any other cultural institutions that didn't involve either alcohol or praying. In fact, when one's day of working or stealing was over, there was little else to do in the city but drink. If one were intellectually inclined, the only art on public display was in saloons and dance halls. So early drinking establishments in San Francisco also served as museums, in which the public could go see reverent works of art, such as paintings, sculptures, literary works, artifacts, and curios obtained from all across the world. Saloons also served as public meeting halls for mining financiers, muses for frontier writers such as Mark Twain, and gathering places for early vigilante law enforcement groups such as the Vigilance Committee.
Our first bottle of the day is the legendary Bank Exchange. Now, this is the rarest bottle out of every bottle I'm going to show you. This thing is sticky ball ponnelled, and it comes from one of the first cosmopolitan saloons built in San Francisco in the 1850s.
San Francisco, 1853. Henry Halleck looked out on the city in disappointment. It was a hastily built, trashy town full of dilapidated Spanish haciendas, canvas tents, and modest wood-frame buildings. Overlooking a smoky harbor packed with the swaying masts of ships abandoned by their crews who had fled to the Sierra foothills, seeking their fortunes. The town had gold money, and people of a softer persuasion, the merchant class, were starting to move in. These bankers and lawyers and traders and financiers needed better accommodations. The city needed an upgrade. And so Halleck embarked on a project to construct the most majestic building San Francisco had ever seen. He imported fancy granite quarried in China to build what would later be called the Montgomery Block, a giant classical revival building composed entirely of solid granite blocks, with iron fireproof window shutters made to withstand the hottest of infernos. But even before the building was completed, locals started calling it Halleck's Folly, due to it being built on a raft of redwood logs designed to roll back and forth in an earthquake. They thought it an absurd, unsafe design. But Halleck, later to become General-in-Chief of the Union Army in the Civil War, was a determined man, and he kept on building. And as soon as the Montgomery Block was completed, sure enough, the city's elites moved into the upper floors, while two men named Thomas Parker and John Torrance opened the Bank Exchange Billiard Saloon on the ground floor. This place wasn't like the other skeezy dive bars in the Wild West at that time. It was designed to attract more affluent and artistically inclined clientele. Local newspapers even advertised the bank exchange as being a place where one could go not only to drink, but to view art and curiosities. Daily Alta, California, May 27, 1870. Samson and Delilah. The bank exchange invaded by ladies. Curiosity to see the great picture. Visitors from abroad, in foreign countries, even the Asiatics pay tribute to the genius of the painter who executed the work and the liberality of the owner in keeping as valuable a painting in a public saloon. Yesterday, a party of ladies, residents of the city with guests from other elites, were escorted to the corner of Washington and Montgomery, and one of the gentlemen was sent to ask permission for the party to pass through the saloon to gratify a desire to see the painting. Cha-cha! Yes, the moment you've been waiting for. Here it is. This is only one of two known examples to exist above ground. The first one being dug by some hippie guy in a trash lair in South of Market, San Francisco in the 1970s. The second one was dug by BottleNed and Judy Miyazaki, an old school San Francisco digger, under a concrete footing about 10 blocks away from where the Bank Exchange Saloon sat. This bottle holds 1/6 of liquor. It's sticky ball pontold, dates from the late 1850s to the early 1860s period, and was probably blown in the eastern United States or possibly even Europe. I'm leaning towards the East Coast though. Torrance and Parker were the first agents for Cutter whiskey on the Pacific Coast, so this could have contained that and could technically be the first Western Cutter whiskey bottle. Here's something that I usually trip out on when looking at this bottle. Okay, so in the early 1860s, when Mark Twain was living in San Francisco and writing for the San Francisco Morning Call newspaper, which sat across the street from the Bank Exchange, he would frequent the saloon to drink and write. And while drinking in there one day, he met a San Francisco firefighter named Tom Sawyer, whom he befriended and who some believe was the inspiration for his book, which he was to write a few years later. And since this bottle dates roughly to the same time period as when Twain was in San Francisco, it's possible that Twain touched, drank out of, or was in close proximity to this bottle. Holy crap! How cool is that?
And now I'm going to tell you guys a really special story about my bot manifestation spiritual psychic powers that I used to possess when I was younger and cooler and more mentally elastic. So this story transcends the laws of time and space. And you might not believe it, but I guarantee this actually happened. I was 25 years old. I was sitting in Mel's Diner with an old school collector / digger. This guy had been digging and collecting for 40 years, and he had seen a lot of bottles. And I asked him, I said, in your opinion, what's the coolest bottle from San Francisco and the rarest and the hardest to get and the most historical? And he said, well, there was a bar called the Bank Exchange, and it started in the 1850s. And hardly anyone knows this, but there was an embossed bottle that says the Bank Exchange, that's pontold, that's associated with this historical drinking establishment. And I said, no way, what? And he said, yes, there's only one known example in existence above ground. It was dug by some hippie dude in a trash lair in South of Market in the 1970s. It's still in that guy's collection, and that's the only one in existence. And I thought, oh my God. And for a few weeks after he told me this story, I'd go digging and I'd find a black glass bottle or some kind of bottle, and it'd be dirty, and I'd be pulling it out of the ground, and I thought, is this what the Bank Exchange bottle looks like? Does it have embossing right here on the shoulder? What's the font look like? What's the color of the bottle? Is this the size of it? And I just was imagining it and fantasizing about it so hard that I don't know, I must have changed the alignment of the universe or something. I actually can't explain this, because out of all the digging that's been done for the last 60 years on the West Coast, And for only one of these bottles to have ever been recovered, finding another one would be like winning the lottery twice in a row. AKA, it's not going to happen. But I was thinking about this bottle, and I just did something that I used to do back in the day. I used to let the thought go and just give up on it, but kind of put it out into the world and just say, you know, this isn't going to happen to me. I'm not going to find this bottle, but I have desire and I'm just going to release it. And a couple weeks later, old Judy Miyazaki invited me to go digging, and she probes this hole under this concrete footing. I dig it down and I start feeling around in the hole with my shovel, and I can feel some squeaks down there. And I'm like, all right, wait. I got to pull these bottles out. And I'm, Judy, can you hold my ankles? And I'm going in head first. And she's like, I guess so. I don't know if this is a good idea. It's sand. It could collapse. And she's holding my ankles. I go in head first into the hole, 6 feet down. I'm reaching at the bottom. I feel these two objects, and they're like these rocks. I can tell they're not glass. They're these hard, dark rocks. And right in the middle, there's something more smooth. And then another inch away, there's another rock. And I've determined that there's a bottle in the middle of these two big rocks. And I'm thinking, wow, 150 years ago, somebody was playing target practice and threw these rocks at this bottle at the bottom of the privy. And they missed the bottle by an inch on either side. So I find the bottle with my hand. I can't really see. And I rub the sand away and I pull it out. And I'm like, Judy, pull me out. And she pulls my ankles, and I'm out of the hole, and I'm clutching this bottle, and I'm looking at it, and it says bank exchange. And it was one of the most surreal moments of my life. I was like, how the hell did I just find this bottle? And I was gasping, and Judy was like, duh! And it was pretty much one of the weirdest things that's ever happened to me, to manifest that bottle. I don't know. There's something else going on in the universe. I can't explain it. If anyone has any thoughts on this, let me know in the comments section. It's so cheesy because a lot of people say that on YouTube, but I'm actually being serious. All I can tell you is that I had a desire for the bottle. I thought about it, and then I let it go out into the world, and then a way too short of a time later, I found that very bottle, and it's still to this day the second one known to exist in the entire world. Ripley's, believe it or not.
And now let's take a look at the rare Baran and Patton Saloon bottle.
Whoa. I think I'm in paradise. But actually, this is the Honk Machine's famous bottle room, a museum of historical California and Western artifacts, including many bottles. And he's going to give a special presentation on the Baran and Patton Saloon and some of the artifacts associated with it. Honker, take it away.
All right. Well, these are some bottles that came from Baran and Patton Saloon, which was at 118 Montgomery Street. And this was actually a new address. The other bottles, the first ones they made were, I believe there's one, the address is different, sorry, 114, 116. So this is probably one of the rarest, and certainly it's the first embossed San Francisco whiskey bottle to exist. This one was found out in landfill out in Oyster Point back in the 70s. They would take the dirt and dump it from downtown and create that new area that they refer to as Oyster Point. But Baran and Patton were
So they excavated dirt from the old cove
in
San Francisco that had a lot of trash dumped into it.
Hauled it by truck out there and dumped it, and then pushed it over with a bulldozer and created more landfill.
Wow. And back then they didn't care about artifacts. They were just looking for dirt to use for fill.
Correct. That's all it was. So,
but fortunately, people like you were on site waiting to pick up this stuff.
As a 16-year-old.
Wow.
But basically, Baran and Patton were characters. They owned a bar right there on Montgomery Street. It started in 1850, and it was quite a notorious bar. Back in the day, the newspapers would have write-ups frequently about stabbings and gunfights that would happen in their bar. But they also, to bring people and patrons in, they had curiosities too. They would have stuffed animals and alligators, and they would have paintings of naked women. And upstairs they had a billiards hall that was apparently second to none and very famous for that. But they also offered different types of food and things to bring people in to drink. But anyway, it was a classic San Francisco bar.
Wow.
From the gold rush.
So some of these artifacts, this is the only known, or one of the only known face embossed small size Baran and Patton bottles that dates to, explain about how old this is.
Yes, this would be probably middle 1850s. There are actually three known. One is in amber, the other two are in this green color. And they're fantastic, really incredible San Francisco history. But they're iron paneled, and which dates them prior to 1860.
Yeah.
And so this is just a beautiful piece of history, local history.
And what about this?
This is a token. This one I didn't dig, but I did dig one of them. And this was good for a drink token they would have given out advertising their bar. And it says, it's kind of cool, it has a seated Liberty on the front, says 1868, but on the back it says Baran and Patton, San Francisco, the Excellent, which was their billiards hall, the Great Tonic of California. So there must have been a drink that they prepared.
That could have been in these bottles.
Could have been. Back in the day, we would always make jokes. We'd dig up a black glass bottle that didn't have any writing on it and yell over to our friends, say, "Oh my God, Baran and Patton." And people would go nuts. And then I'd say, "No, just kidding, it's not."
You joker.
But finally, I dug this token and wiped it off, and I said, "Oh my God, it says Baran and Patton," and nobody believed me. But it did. I said, "No, it does."
That's what happens.
Anyway, that's
Let's see the one you dug.
This is the one I dug. It's a little bit harder to read, but
and you dug this in the piles of excavated dirt
upside down. But I did. Yeah, it was in the mud.
So somebody dropped this off of a wharf or whatever.
They must have. They've lost it. Somehow ended up in the mud. That's right.
What else do we have here?
Well, we do have other Baran and Patton bottles. This was the rarest of the two. There are actually three variants of this bottle. The neck embossed, or shoulder, embossed Baran and Patton, San Francisco, has a little bit different address on it, 114, 116, as I stated earlier, but this one is paneled. This would be the fifth size, they call it fifth, and this would actually be a quart. It's much larger. They were probably the latest bottles they made because they're not paneled, probably in the 1860s. But
early, mid, late 1860s?
Probably mid 1860s.
Yeah, right after the Civil War.
Correct. And they were these are the three variants of bottles that came from there. We have these bottles that we think probably were Baran and Patton bottles, but they were unembossed. If you see, they're almost identical.
Yeah.
And they probably had a label on them, but we dug quite a few of these.
What was in these, more than likely?
More than likely whiskey in these. Although they did advertise, other products, and they would probably bottle them and label them accordingly.
And you have a book too, right? That they
wrote? A book, yeah. So in 1873, these two guys, Baran and Patton, wrote. It's called Men and Memories of in the spring of '50, and it was printed in 1873. And
see the title page.
They tell stories, basically. There it is, Men and Memories in the spring of 1850, by T.A. Barry, Ted, and Benjamin Patton. Anyway, it's kind of first-hand experience. They would be talking about the good old days from 1873 going back to the late 1840s, early 50s, referring to some of their fellow merchants that were down the street and characters that would come into the bar, and just talking about buildings that existed in 1850 that on certain corners that don't exist now in 1873. So it's kind of interesting because none of us have that reference.
Yeah, I know.
And so
in 1873 San Francisco, the good old days were 1849,
right?
The 49
and so
the days
it's changed so much.
The gold rush.
But it is interesting because you know where those corners are. It's hard to imagine what would have been there. But it's a fantastic read.
Yeah,
they tend to ramble a little bit, but it's really fun to.
Well, so do you.
Hear. Yes,
no, I'm just kidding.
I do.
Actually, you're doing pretty well.
So it's fun.
Are you like a host for PBS or some shit?
No.
You're pretty good.
Anyway, this
There we
is
go,
the,
done?
yeah, well, this is just the bottle room.
The hell out of that, I hope.
No, dude, everything you said was actually pretty relevant. Oh, God, I got to get out of here. I'm going to explode. Jealousy.
You're funny.
Here it goes. Going
Right back in its place.
Now its place is on my shelf, dude.
Exactly. Now I want to show you my ball jaws.
No, I don't want to see any of those. Get those things out of here. Pot lids, it's just endless, dude. We'll do another feature on another artifact from the Old West, originating from San Francisco, in another video.
Oh, and one more thing, the Baran and Patton Saloon also served as the headquarters for meetings of the Vigilance Committee, which was an armed band of vigilantes that banded together in Gold Rush San Francisco because there was no law enforcement and there was all these crazy Australian outlaws coming from New South Wales, and they formed a gang called the Sydney Coves, aka the Sydney Ducks, and they would just burn the entire city down just to create a distraction while they robbed people. So that's another cool fact about the Baran and Patton Saloon. Okay, that's the end of this short video. I just wanted to give some history and just satisfy you guys while you're waiting patiently for me to create my next feature-length video, which will be toxic waste bottle digging. And the reason why it's been taking so long is because I've been digging in toxic waste and I got exposed to a bunch of petrochemicals. I've been unable to sleep. I've gotten slowly poisoned over the last month. It's been really tough. I've been getting headaches, and I'm not exaggerating. It sucks. But, you know, it's good because I found a lot of nice bottles, and we're going to feature those in the upcoming video. I might make it a two-parter. And thanks, guys, for hanging in there. We'll see you soon. Bottle!